Good morning, Wairarapa. This is Anna Cardno from the DHB with the Wraparound Wairarapa, a show that comes to you every Wednesday morning exploring the different services that are available, support services that are available in Wairarapa. And with me in the studio today, I have Donna from Supporting Families. Donna, can I get you to introduce yourself, please?
Morning everybody, my name's Donna Dharmika and I am the Manager of Supporting Families Wairarapa.
Fantastic. And Supporting Families is that fabulous spot that provides so much service for so many people. There is a great need, we know that, in the Wairarapa. It's all around wellness, and I know that you do a wonderful amount of things for a huge amount of people, very valuable, but I don't know that necessarily everybody knows about it. So tell us what you do at Supporting Families.
Well, thank you, Anna. Well, we're a mental health and addiction service, and the focus primarily was around supporting family members who have a loved one who may be affected by any of those particular illnesses. However, we extend our supports in that space to not only family members, but also to individuals who may be suffering from mental illness and or addictions. So we have pretty much an open door policy on a whole range of issues that come out of that fall out of that. So often over the years, I've come in to see you. We've had meetings in your office. We've been involved in suicide prevention and a whole bunch of things together. It's been great fun, and you do a whole heap for a whole heap of people. But maybe if we just wind it back a little bit and talk about how Supporting Families came about. We were just talking a little earlier around the Schizophrenia Foundation and how that then developed. And let's have a chat about that. So absolutely. Well, you know, our organisation is quite old. It's well and truly entrenched in the Wairarapa in terms of the work that it was done many years ago. I think it was 32 plus years ago. We had a number of houses back then, and I am led to believe that the organisation itself was subject to a number of bequeathments by individual family members that had seen a need or had family members who were affected or impacted in some way by a mental illness. So the organisation ran a soup kitchen. Had a home that was offered residential services for emergency purposes for individuals. That was fully staffed, and we also had a drop-in centre. So over the years, like every other organisation, subject to funding, those organisations, the breadth of the services that were offered actually dwindled down. We now operate by appointment, and our drop-in centre, which serviced a number of our tangata whaiora within the community, was operational right up just before COVID. We closed that.
Closed the drop-in.
Mm-hmm. Closed the drop-in
and
centre.
Now provide it by appointment, so scheduled appointment
by appointments.
For people that are looking for support.
Absolutely.
So I guess so much is subject to funding, isn't it? When it boils down to it, we have all these fabulous programs, and they're funded often for a period of time, and then when that funding disappears, sometimes we can lose that service. But what we see here with what you've just described is we do have some of those sort of services here that have been picked up elsewhere, in terms of, you talked about the soup kitchen, and we do have organisations that in the community that are picking that stuff up. A lot of it's voluntary, isn't it? Voluntary driven. But it just goes to show that need hasn't gone away, but the services are perhaps a little bit more disparate.
Yes, absolutely. So, if we go back to the soup kitchen, if we were to take that into, do the quantum leap, and, in this day and age, what we're seeing is the community kitchen, which is brilliant, which is operating from volunteers. So organisations such as ours, we contribute to that by having a day where we'll go in and cook meals.
And you collect
for the community.
Food products and stuff for
Absolutely.
From people, donations, yeah.
Absolutely. Lynn Tankersley from the food bank, marvellous.
Amazing woman.
Absolutely. So, we have a very close relationship with her because we have tangata whaiora in common, so to speak.
Sure.
So
you're supporting the same people in whānau out there.
Yeah. And what we've seen over the years, that we've diversified our service in terms of being able to cater to a whole range, and that's inclusive of children from 5 years up in terms of the resilience program, children living in the presence of a family member with mental illness and or addictions. And we have peer support groups that we operate within our service, and we have the WAVES program, which caters to family members who may be bereaved by suicide. Not only family members, friends, community members.
That's a fantastic program.
Yes, it is, absolutely. And unfortunately, it's necessary, Unfortunately, it's sad.
Yeah, it is. It's terribly unfortunate. And but I am heartened by the recent figures that have come out from the ministry in terms of Wairarapa numbers. So I know, winding it back when you and I did all that work on the Too Many Wairarapa program, back in 2016 we were looking at, some pretty serious state here in the Wairarapa with far too many people that were dying by suicide. And now those numbers have halved in the last few years, but it's still far too many. There's people, families, so many people behind. It's not just one number, is it?
No, and the impact is so far-reaching.
But the supports that you provide, you work in that preventative space, don't you? I mean, you get people that come and now they have to book to come and see you, but they can come and see you and work with supporting families to have that support and help them build that resilience and be able to recognise that every day is a better day. That's the bulk of what you're doing behind the scenes.
It is. When I said we've diversified, we've actually entered into emergency housing too. So we provide emergency housing for family members. We have properties that we now oversee. So that's and that whole essential service was brought about by the number of people that were presenting to our organisation homeless.
Is that just very recently with the COVID lockdown that you were aware of that, or is this?
No. It's been a growing issue over the years, and so we identified the need and set about setting up as an accredited emergency housing provider also. So we have that operating at the moment, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So the emergency housing, is that for homeless particularly, or is it for people that, do you get involved in people who have to leave their home in an emergency situation because of violence or, incompatibility, those sorts of things?
Well, basically there's no barriers to that. If they're in need, they're in need, and there is a process in which they go through, which is quite is simplified because people, organisations, and I acknowledge MSD in this, forum in terms of they've made the process a lot more seamless for clientele, which is brilliant. Because it's really overwhelming. If you're homeless, then there's a whole host of other issues that impact on you and your children. We've got a process whereby it's not as intrusive or overwhelming for families if they're entering into the emergency housing, situation.
That situation where it's required nowhere to be. And so with that emergency housing that you provide at supporting families, they can access that through you, coming through to you, and you will put them in an emergency lodging somewhere, one of the houses that you have. And then how does it work from there? What is the support and guidance through into getting them into a more sustainable place to live? How does that work?
Well, that's the beauty about emergency housing. We're able to provide a wraparound service for family members and support them all the way through, and that's part of the conditions of going into emergency housing. Families are often impacted by, like finances. Have you probably seen sort of the lines of rental applicants waiting to, view properties? It's ridiculous in this day and age.
The competition for rental housing is huge, isn't it?
I hear that. there's been occasions where myself or my workers have actually taken clients to view properties, and we were of the opinion, well, okay, it's 2:15, we turn up there and there's a line of people waiting to view the property, and you can just see the client will automatically sigh, like, it's hopeless, Donna, we're not going to get a house, and and you have to pick them up and say, no, let's go in, and and just, you've got, young mums who are pregnant, lots of children, everyone's got a story, everyone's in need. It's quite a sad place, actually.
So would you say in Wairarapa then that we are unique in that, having that enormous need, or where do we sit with that? What is our homeless situation like here compared to sort of nationally?
One of the things about Wairarapa, in terms of being unique, we are unique because we're almost seem to be an addition, which is unfortunate. I remember, sort of some years ago going to a meeting where we talked about emergency register that was to be kept by our government organisations, which hadn't been. We hadn't collated that data for Wairarapa. So that data, of course, generated funding and housing to cater to the need. Because we didn't capture that data as well as we should have, that has certainly impacted on housing today. It's nationwide. The emergency housing need is nationwide. It's extremely concerning that we're looking at properties that the rent is beyond most people's, financial capability. So there are a whole host of things that prevent people from being able to secure long-term
and that's where the stories
housing
that we hear so frequently about people that are living in cars and abandoned buildings and those sorts of things.
Absolutely, we had
they have to be somewhere.
We had a young mum that came to us last Friday, for instance, with 3 children and needing to be housed, facing the likelihood of sleeping in her car with her children. And I mean, I'm talking very young children. Talking about having, attempted to view a number of properties, applied. When you're a solo mother, you're already, subject to discrimination.
Absolutely. And you could feel that heartbreak, can't you? Yeah, right. I mean, you can just imagine how horrific. Well, actually, we probably can't imagine. Yeah, we go home to our own homes every night, so you can probably not imagine. But, as a mother myself, thinking about my own children being in that situation, it's just heartbreaking, isn't it?
It is.
So they come to you, Donna, at Supporting Families, and presumably they ring up, make an appointment, make a time to see you, and you can then help guide them through. You help, when it comes to housing, you'll take them to view rental properties, or you'll set them up in your emergency housing that you have. You'll also help them with budgeting advice,
a whole host of things,
mental health issues,
schooling for children,
welfare support. Yep.
There may be engagements with other organisations, for instance. It may be, MSD, OT, justice, so it's engaging all of those services and, working through the whole, navigation around all these organisations for them, preparing them for the whole house hunting, and some of the organisations that we work closely with have even prepared their clients in terms of being able to dress appropriately for viewing properties and the like. So we're actually, going to, we're grooming people in preparation for viewing properties. And we're having to do that. So there's an interesting, there was some interesting training that MSD did for those that provide emergency housings in the Manawatu and the Wairarapa region. So there's Supporting Families Wairarapa that provides emergency housing and Emerge here in the Wairarapa. So Emerge has a larger portfolio, But they provide a wraparound service, as do we, you know, in terms of supporting families, and they need that. You know, in emergency housing, it doesn't just mean that you require housing. There are a whole host of things that you start unpacking with family members. And, you know, like in terms of preparing them, some of them are so broken when they come into, because they've needed emergency housing. How do you get them to a place where they're confident and
actually in a place where they're able to even start thinking for themselves about doing that stuff. Yeah. And so your connections must be very broad across the services that we've got available to them in your navigation type role. Do you work alongside Emerge as well? Do you work with Emerge?
Yes.
So, you know, you help each other out in terms of if you've got...
We have, and Emerge has done a wonderful job in housing some of our clientele prior to us becoming an emergency housing provider too. So working in that space together, it's been great.
I know that when we were working through the health response, and obviously we're still in it with COVID-19, one of the things that did come up for us in terms of both the District Health Board incident management team, we were working daily on how we were approaching the response, and we were also working with the councils that put together the Emergency Operations Centre and the Wairarapa COVID-19 response. And out of that came a very early on in that response came the awareness of the number of homeless people in the Wairarapa community. I know Ian Oslin from Police, Wairarapa Police, did quite a bit of work on that, and you're connected in with, presumably, with police and also with the likes of the women's welfare and those sorts of organisations as well.
We, you know, when the need arises, absolutely, you know, engaging where there is the need too, in consultation with our clientele, you know, with certainly with their consent also. But I think that one of the beauties about the Wairarapa is that we're a small organisation, you know, we're a smaller area. We are a tighter community. It's I consider it to be quite a blessing. Great space to work in, on a professional level, because you actually gain those relationships. When you have those strong networks, it makes the work that we do a lot easier, and you can navigate family members and individuals through that process because of those relationships. Because of the
connections that we have throughout the sector. And cross-sector too in the Wairarapa. I mean, often if you're in the health sector, your connections are very much health-oriented. But in the Wairarapa, because we are so small, we can have those really close relationships across education and across justice and across police and all of those things, can't we? Welfare. Yeah. So it actually works in our favour. I think Wairarapa can often feel quite geographically isolated, and you were talking before about how often you can be an add-on. So Wairarapa is often the sort of additional. You think about sort of Greater Wellington region, and Wairarapa is sort of a part of that. But when we're in it, we can actually operate quite effectively across the services ourselves, can't we? But it still amazes me, and always has, and I think that's where this show, Wraparound Wairarapa, came about, is the proliferation of services that we have in the Wairarapa that deal with health and wellness. It's confusing for people. There's a lot out there to try and muddle your way through.
Oh, especially in light of COVID. I've seen a marked increase for our service, for instance, and people who are actually combing the net, looking for services as and in dire states, for a number of them, like losing jobs, not knowing what depression is, but feel incredibly sad, can't get out of bed,
feel completely overwhelmed and then don't know how to deal with that because perhaps have never been in that situation before.
And family members ringing and making inquiries. Family members who, families who are presenting to us who have never accessed these types of services before.
And that must be hard for them, right? That's a pride thing, isn't it? That's extremely a real pride thing. I mean, we've talked about that quite extensively over the last couple of months around the types of people, very professional people that have been successful for, their entire lives. And they're now, having to look at jobs that they wouldn't otherwise have considered. They're having to look at the jobs that are available for them, working in supermarkets, those sorts of things that perhaps they've been working at a very professional level, but their job's gone because of COVID. And that's tough. That's tough for them.
Yes, and it's interesting how people are reacting in that space too. Had a gentleman who was going to work for a month. He didn't have his job. He did not have his job.
And he was
going to work as if he had his job, and his wife
had no idea.
After a month he couldn't continue. And that was interesting, and I thought, and her acknowledging, that wasn't a problem for her. They could get through this, but he had worked himself into a place where the depression had set in, and he was in a space where he couldn't,
And you can totally
that.
You can imagine that, can't you? And that boils back to that sense of responsibility we have as Kiwis to provide and to be out there
for the family.
And I think that you hear that saying always. People are broke at a different level, aren't they? You hear that about what is significantly depressing and a huge blow, a crushing blow for people is different regardless of where you are on the spectrum. You can be unemployed and have never really understood or known success in your life, or you can be this very, very professional person, used to a very healthy bank account, and then a situation will happen like COVID that completely takes you out of your own environment, and your reaction is still very specific to you. Do you know what I mean? That professional person that suddenly needs to look for a job, and he's been self-employed for 30 years successfully, he's going to feel that as much as perhaps somebody else who's, in a different way, but it's going to really, really affect him and his family.
Yeah. And people having to use coping mechanisms that they didn't know that they had, or not having those coping mechanisms. You can take them into the workplace, into a professional setting, and they have that. Like you throw any risk at them, and they can mitigate that risk immediately. And
they can professionally deal with things in a workplace setting, but then in a personal environment, take away somebody's security and sense of purpose, and it changes everything for people. So what are those basics then? Supporting, in support of the people that have been enormously affected by COVID, housing aside, they still have their home, but they've been enormously affected. They're feeling the effects of the environment that we're in currently, very anxious, depressed, perhaps even suicidal, really affecting them and their family. What can they do?
Certainly access our services. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's say, where do we find you?
Yeah.
We're supporting families.
323 Queen Street.
Yep.
Our buildings are a charcoal coloured building. It used to be very green.
It used to be
for
very
a number
green.
of years.
Yeah.
So the colours recently changed. We're directly across from transit, so it's a good place to be in terms of access for the community that may need to have, use public transport to get to us. But we're very central in town. We also have vocational services. We have advocacy, peer support, the suicide prevention, post-vention coordinator sits within our office, is housed within our office. We have a number of other services that come in and utilise our space. So it's a space that offers a whole host of things, and certainly everybody's more than welcome to come along and make an appointment if you're feeling that you need a level of support. Some people actually don't know what type of support they need.
I'd say there's a lot of people out there like that, hey, just feeling that real anxiety and not knowing where to turn. And I think that's the beauty of supporting families, is that you give people that place to be, that place to go, and somewhere to turn to get the answers to the questions they haven't even asked yet. They don't even know what the questions are. But you're there to be able to help guide them through that. I think that navigational role that you can provide to help guide people to where they need to go to and to get them what they need, that's huge. That's probably your greatest asset that you can provide for people.
Well,
isn't
it's the growing need, under this current, in this current climate is interesting. We operate, as do other organisations, through a locked door, and we have to do that. We have a whole host of volunteers that were manning in the front of our building, and that's always great because it offers that level of support for volunteers who are, maybe socially isolated.
And gives them a purpose, gives them something to do.
Them a sense of purpose, absolutely.
Great thing, actually, isn't it, volunteering? Because it really can solve a lot of problems for people that didn't even know they had problems to solve. That feeling useful and doing something important.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah. It's brilliant. And we have vocational services. So with the unemployment, the rising unemployment that we're seeing at the moment, so we have, a vocational worker who understands people in that space. So, come along, have your CV written.
So you help people write their CVs, as well as plan
prepare them up for employment. Look for roles for them, specific roles for them, and help sort of guide them in that space. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, and our vocational worker is someone that understands being in that, like having to look for a role and that whole feeling of struggling and not around it.
Oh, that's fantastic that there's that. Because writing a CV can be the first thing that puts you off getting a job. It's stressful looking for a job, and then when you read a job ad and the first thing it says is send your CV. And we've probably got people out there that have never written a CV before. That in itself can be a real barrier, can't it?
And we just happen to have a lovely woman for the next couple of months, and she's comms.
Oh, fabulous.
She's ex-comms, so, writing CVs is her forte.
Yeah.
She's written some beautiful pieces for people who have gone away and felt, quite special.
But even that, hey, together. Just putting that pride back into a person that's broken by saying,
that's right.
Actually, because when you sit someone down and you try and build a CV, you can do cool stuff. You can really, unravel the essence of that person, and you can always find something, a real strength in there that they might not have even seen before. So having that conversation.
And she's brilliant at that too.
You must get people that walk out of supporting families with a big smile on their face that they walked in looking completely broken.
I think that's one of the rewarding things.
Yeah. How long have you been working there?
I have been working there now for just over 3 years. I have a brilliant board. They're absolutely marvellous. And I'm very fortunate to have worked in that space. Or be working in this space, actually. Working in this space.
I think Wairarapa is very lucky to have you working in this space. You're obviously incredibly passionate. I've worked with you for several years, and you're very passionate about what you do. What would be your best piece of advice for somebody out there listening right now who's just feeling completely overwhelmed and doesn't know where to go, what to do? What would be your, when you get up this morning, this is what I want you to do sort of piece of advice?
Well, find us on the net. Look us up. Our number's 06377 3081. Call us. We can help you, support you in finding the right place to go to. And and don't hesitate. Don't hesitate. You'll always find a friendly face. And I think it's really important that people, sometimes we just have to take that extra step. And there's also some really good programs on the net. If you don't want to make phone calls, but you want to have that support, there are a whole host of apps that could be supportive in that role for you if you're really not quite ready to make a phone call to an organisation.
And not quite ready to come in front up to a person in particular.
To a person, yeah.
And of course anyone who's very anxious and really struggling, that 1737 is a good... As a good helpline, isn't it? Just that call or text 1737. It's quite an easy number to remember, and it's always just get out there and ring. And of course, GP, see your GP, talk to your doctor, talk to your health professional, those sorts of things. But actually, I think that first step can always be supporting families on Queen Street in Masterton, because the help that you guys can provide is phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely.
We're so lucky to have you.
And we can take you off to your GP. we can do all of those things. So that's the beauty of doing what we do.
The one-stop support shop.
Yeah, yeah, that's I think, I've worked for a number of organisations, big organisations, over my many years of working in this similar space, and I must say I can be as creative as, we've been really creative as an organisation, which is, I believe it hasn't, there's no restrictions in terms of what we've been able to do for our clientele. And because we don't have those restrictions.
And one of the beauties of, again, talking about Wairarapa, one of the beauties of being small organisation, small team of people, great connections, which broadens the reach, but you can be responsive. We can be flexible and agile and respond, see a need and respond quickly because we're small enough to do that and independent enough to do that. And we've got brilliant, vibrant people like you that can come and do that. And on that note, we're at the end of our show, so we're going to have to wrap up. But Donna, it's been fabulous having you.
Lovely.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for having me.
And everybody out there that's struggling and needing support, supporting families on Queen Street, charcoal coloured building, look them up, give them a call, find them on the online. Just look for supporting families and ask to speak to one of the fabulous team.
Okay, lovely.
Thank you,
Anna.